truffle oil and aged parmesan, and the particular kind of candlelight that restaurants like Maison Vert used specifically to make money look like warmth. Ethan Cole stood at the entrance of the private dining room on the 4th floor, the one that required a separate reservation, a separate elevator, and if you were the kind of person who cared about such things, a separate identity. And he breathed in through his nose slowly, the way a man breathes when he is deciding something. Not panicking, not grieving, deciding. The room held 14 people. He had arranged 11 of the reservations himself. He knew the sommelier's name, Didier, because he had called ahead 3 weeks ago to specify that the 2017 Chateau Pichon Baron should be opened 45 minutes before service, not 30 once, because Vanessa's business contact from Lyon preferred his Bordeaux with adequate breathing room, and details like that were the kind of thing Ethan noticed, had always noticed, the kind of thing that made people like Vanessa possible. There was a seat at the head of the long table. Oak, upholstered in dark navy linen, positioned where the light from the window hit the table at a particular angle, so that whoever sat there appeared, to the rest of the room, to be glowing faintly. Ethan had requested that specific placement from the event coordinator, a woman named Britta, who remembered him as the quiet one who always tipped in cash and got everything right. He had selected that seat for himself, not out of vanity, out of purpose. The Lyon contact, Sebastien Moreau, as a logistics magnate with regional distribution rights across 6 European countries, needed to be seated across from someone with the technical knowledge to discuss the infrastructure side of the Hartwell Group's proposed expansion. Ethan was that someone. He had been that someone for 4 years running. He had the models, the projections, the forensic breakdowns of Hartwell's supply chain that Moreau's team had specifically requested. He was also, as it turned out, standing at the entrance of the room rather than sitting in his seat, because his seat was occupied. Marcus Hale leaned back in the navy-upholstered chair, like a man who had been told the chair was his. While he was wearing a jacket that cost more than Ethan's first car, and laughing at something Sebastien Moreau had just said, with the particular laugh of a man who has learned how to laugh at things he doesn't understand. He had a drink in his hand. The 2017 Pichon Baron, Ethan noticed. The bottle Ethan had specified. Vanessa was 3 seats down, turned toward Moreau with her shoulder angled just so, the way she angled her shoulder when she was performing sincerity for someone whose approval she required. She was wearing the gold dress, the one Ethan had picked up from the alterations shop on Clement Street, because she had a board meeting the morning of the pickup, and he had been the one, again, with the time. It fit her perfectly. Of course it did. She looked up when he appeared in the doorway, and her eyes registered him with a flatness he had not seen before, or perhaps had seen many times before and simply misread as tiredness. Ethan. She said his name the way you'd say the name of a plumber who had arrived at an inconvenient time. Measured, faintly apologetic, entirely without panic. I didn't think you'd make it. I confirmed this morning, he said. His voice was level. He had not decided yet what to do with his voice, so he kept it in neutral. Right. She glanced at Marcus briefly, the kind of glance that carried a full conversation. Marcus flew in from New York last minute. We needed him at the table for the distribution discussion. He's been working with Sebastian's team on the Frankfurt side. She paused. The pause was one beat too long. I had Britta set a place for you at the secondary table, just outside. The round one by the bar. You can follow along on the materials. The secondary table. By the bar. The round one, which seated 4, and which Ethan knew held the junior associates and the EA, who had been told she'd have a speaking role, but wouldn't. No one at the primary table made eye contact with him, except Moreau, briefly, whose face held an expression Ethan could not immediately classify. It was not pity. It was closer to recognition. Ethan said nothing for 11 seconds. He counted, because counting was something he did when he needed to prevent himself from moving too quickly. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked to the secondary table by the bar. He sat down. He ordered a coffee. Not the Bordeaux, not the sparkling water, just a black coffee from the server, who looked barely 22 and kept glancing at the primary table like she'd wandered into the wrong life. He opened the material folder he'd brought and laid it flat in front of him. He crossed one leg over the other, and he listened. He listened to Marcus Hale describe the Frankfurt infrastructure with the vague confidence of a man who had read a briefing document once, that morning, on a plane. He listened to Moreau ask a follow-up question about port access and loading schedules that Marcus fumbled around for 40 seconds before Vanessa redirected the conversation with a practiced pivot toward big-picture synergies. He listened to Moreau's assistant, a young woman with a precise haircut, who held a tablet the way analysts hold tablets, like a weapon. Type something, stop, and type again. At one point, Moreau looked toward the entrance, then he looked at the secondary table. His eyes found Ethan for one moment. Ethan held his gaze and gave the smallest possible nod. The kind that said, "Yes, I know what he just got wrong. I have the right answer. I am sitting here." Moreau looked back at the primary table. The dinner lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. The Frankfurt deal was not closed. Moreau's assistant, Ethan would later learn from a contact in the logistics sector, had flagged significant gaps in technical preparedness in her post-meeting report. The Lion partnership went to a competing firm 4 months later. Ethan finished his coffee. He placed the cup precisely in the center of the saucer. He left $40 on the table for the young server. What he drove home to the apartment that still had his name on the lease, because Vanessa's name was on the mortgage of the house they had been discussing moving into together for 3 years, the house Ethan had helped her finance by co-signing a second loan he had then quietly paid down. And he sat in the kitchen under the fluorescent light that had been flickering for 2 weeks because he hadn't gotten around to replacing the bulb. He did not cry. He had not cried in a long time, and he did not cry now because crying was a form of processing grief, and he had not yet decided what shape this was going to take. He sat under the flickering light, and he thought about Sebastian Moreau's expression, and he thought about a woman named Britta, who remembered him as the one who always got it right. He thought about 4 years of quarterly projections, logistical overhauls, contract revisions, and sourcing audits that lived in the server architecture of the Hartwell Group, under folders labeled with other people's names. He thought about his seat at a table he had built. Then he opened his laptop, and he began to look at things. He was, by profession, a financial forensics consultant. Not Vanessa's. He had never taken a formal position with Hartwell, had always been careful about that, because he had seen, early on, the way Vanessa treated people who were formally on her payroll. He consulted independently for a range of clients, mostly mid-sized firms in the Bay Area, also occasionally larger institutions, when their internal audit teams needed someone who could trace money with the kind of patience most people reserve for long grudges. He was good at it. He was, without exaggeration, exceptional at it. He had found a $4.2 million discrepancy in a real estate holding company's filings that their own forensic team had missed for 3 years. He had done it in 11 days. He brought this skill home every evening to an apartment with a flickering bulb, and a woman who had, over 4 years, learned to treat his competence the way wealthy people treat good plumbing. Expected. Invisible. Not worth discussing at dinner. And now, sitting in that kitchen, with his coffee cooling and his laptop open and the light flickering above him in its 2-second rhythm, he turned that skill, the patient, cold, so extraordinarily detailed skill, inward, toward Hartwell Group. He started with the public filings, 10KS, quarterly reports, the annual disclosure documents that most people read the executive summary of and nothing else. He read everything. He had read most of it before because Vanessa had asked him to take a look in the early years when the company was still finding its structure, and because he had the particular habit of noticing things and then setting them aside mentally, the way a person sets a key on a hook by the door, not because they need it right now, but because they know exactly where it will be when they do. He noticed 3 things in the first 2 hours. Thus, the first was a discrepancy in the 2021 fiscal year filings between reported revenue from the Hong Kong subsidiary and the figure that appeared in the intercompany transfer records he had access to through an old consulting arrangement with Hartwell's prior CFO, a man named Gerard, who had left the company 18 months ago under circumstances that Vanessa described as a cultural misalignment, but which Ethan, now, was beginning to reframe. The second was a legal structure around Hartwell's real estate holdings, specifically 3 commercial properties in the East Bay that had been reorganized in 2022 through a series of LLCs whose registered agents led back, through 2 layers of corporate nesting, to a personal holding company that was not Hartwell Group. The holding company's name was Ardent Pacific Holdings. Ethan had never heard of it. The third thing he noticed was that his own name appeared in the metadata of 14 internal Hartwell documents as the originating author in documents that had been subsequently attributed to Vanessa's then Chief Strategy Officer in the version that was filed with the board. The documents were supply chain restructuring proposals that had saved the company, by Ethan's own calculation, approximately $2.8 million annually. He noted all 3 things in a new document. He titled the document Nothing, just left it blank, a white page, so that if anyone were to glance at his screen, they would see only the blinking cursor and mistake it for emptiness. He replaced the fluorescent bulb. He slept 4 hours. In the morning, he called Gerard. Gerard Falk was 53 years old. It lived in Marin County, in a house he had bought at the peak of his corporate career, and was slowly selling off in increments. First the second car, then the boat, then a piece of art he had never really understood but had bought, because a woman he was trying to impress had nodded at it. And he was, when Ethan reached him at 8:45 on a Tuesday morning, drinking instant coffee on his porch and watching the bay with the resigned expression of a man who has been proven right about something devastating and takes no satisfaction in it. "I figured you'd call eventually," Gerard said. He didn't ask why. "Tell me about Ardent Pacific," Ethan said. There was a pause. On the porch, across the bay, a foghorn sounded twice. "I didn't set it up," Gerard said. "I found it, and that's why I'm in Marin watching seagulls instead of in a downtown office watching someone else's money." Another pause. "What do you know?" "Enough to ask the right questions," Ethan said. "Tell me what I don't know." Gerard told him. It took 40 minutes and 3 interruptions where Gerard had to put the phone down and walk away from whatever window he was afraid of speaking near. And by the end of it, Ethan had a picture that was not yet complete, but was complete enough to understand its shape. Ardent Pacific Holdings had been established in 2019, 2 years into Vanessa's tenure as CEO of Hartwell Group. Its beneficial owner, not the registered agent, the actual beneficial owner, was a trust that had been set up in Nevada under a name Ethan did not immediately recognize, the Crane Meridian Trust. Nevada trusts were legal. They were also, for specific reasons, asset protection laws, trustee confidentiality provisions, the particular way Nevada statute handled third-party claims, the preferred vehicle of people who needed their wealth to be difficult to find. Ethan knew this because two of his forensic clients in the past 5 years had needed him to look into Nevada trusts, and he had spent considerable time understanding exactly how they were constructed and, more importantly, exactly how to dismantle the opacity around them within the bounds of existing discovery law. He spent the next week not calling Vanessa. She texted him twice. The first text was brief. "You good?" The second, 3 days later, was, "Can you pick up my dry cleaning? Britta is swamped." He read both and put the phone face down. And he called a corporate attorney he had worked with on a prior engagement, a woman named Petra Chen, who practiced out of a glass-walled office in the financial district and who had, on 3 separate occasions, told Ethan that he thought like a lawyer without the liability of one, which she meant as a high compliment. "I need to understand the marital property implications of assets held in a Nevada trust when the beneficial owner of that trust is a spouse," Ethan said, without preamble, when Petra picked up. There was a pause. "Are we doing a hypothetical?" Petra said. "Or are we doing a consult?" "Consult," Ethan said. "Bill me." Petra billed him for 4 hours over 2 sessions, and by the end of those sessions, Ethan had 3 things he had not possessed before: a complete understanding of what Vanessa had done, as a framework for what could legally be done about it, and the quiet, clean, almost architectural clarity of a man who has found the load-bearing wall in someone else's carefully constructed house. Here is what Vanessa had done. Beginning in 2019, she had structured a series of asset transfers from Hartwell Group's operating revenues into Ardent Pacific Holdings through consulting fees paid to a firm that, on paper, provided strategic advisory services to Hartwell's real estate division. The firm existed. It had a registered address, a website, a single-page corporate filing. It had no employees and produced no work product. The consulting fees, across 3 years, totaled just over $6.4 million. Those fees flowed through Ardent Pacific and eventually into the Crane Meridian Trust, on which was structured under Nevada statute in a way that insulated its assets from corporate creditors. The trust's beneficiary was Vanessa, solely. This structure had 2 implications. The first was financial. It meant that Vanessa had been systematically diverting Hartwell revenue for personal enrichment while holding a fiduciary duty to the company's shareholders. That was, in a word that Petra Chen used with the measured precision of a woman who does not use words carelessly, fraud. The second implication was marital. Under California community property law, assets accumulated during a marriage, or in the case of a long-term cohabitation partnership where common law protections apply, during the period of domestic partnership, are subject to equitable division. Vanessa and Ethan were not married. They had never formally married, but they had cohabitated for 4 years, during which time Ethan had contributed in labor, in unpaid consulting, in loan co-signatures and expense absorption to the financial architecture that had made Vanessa's accumulation possible. California did not recognize common law marriage, but California did recognize claims of unjust enrichment and quantum meruit, legal concepts that allowed a party who had conferred a benefit on another without compensation to seek recovery of that benefit's value. Petra walked him through the quantum meruit framework for 1 full hour. She used a whiteboard. She wrote numbers. At one point, she looked at Ethan across the table and said, "Well, you understand that what you're describing, if the forensic evidence supports it, is essentially a case where she used you as an instrument of her enrichment and then structured her assets specifically to exclude you from any claim on them." "Yes," Ethan said. "And I want to understand what I'm holding," he said, "before I decide what to do with it." Petra nodded. She capped her marker. "You're holding quite a bit," she said. He drove home. He stopped at a coffee shop, not the kind with a line and a loyalty card, the kind with 3 tables and a woman behind the counter who looked like she'd been there since the building was constructed, who made drip coffee in a machine from a decade that predated artisanal anything, and who handed it to him in a paper cup with a sleeve that was slightly damp on one side. He sat at one of the 3 tables, and he held the cup in both hands, and he thought about the shape of the next 18 months of his life. He was 36 years old. He had spent 4 of those years making someone else's table possible. He had sourced the wood, leveled the legs, calibrated the height, and then been sent to sit at the one by the bar. He thought about this for exactly as long as it took to drink the coffee. Then he left. He did not move out of the apartment immediately. This was not sentimentality. It was strategy. Moving out created a paper trail, signaled preparation, and, if Vanessa's attorney was paying attention, could prompt her to accelerate asset protection measures he had not yet fully mapped. He needed 3 things before he made any visible move: a complete forensic picture of the Hartwell financials, and a legal structure for his own future entity, and a client. The client came first. His name was Raymond Tso, and Ethan had done work for his family office 18 months earlier. A clean, contained engagement tracing the path of a $900,000 discrepancy in a mid-sized logistics company in which the Tso family had a minority stake. Ethan had found the discrepancy in 7 days, traced it to a VP of operations who had been running a parallel invoicing scheme for 22 months, and delivered a report that was precise enough to support a successful civil recovery action. Raymond had thanked him with a wire transfer and a handshake, and at the end of the meeting said, "If you ever want to do this at scale, call me." Ethan called him. They met at a hotel bar in the financial district. Not the hotel's main bar, was the quieter one off the lobby that business people used when they needed to have conversations that the main bar was too bright for. Raymond was 51, compact, dressed in a way that communicated wealth through absence of effort, rather than presence of display. He ordered sparkling water. He listened to Ethan with the particular stillness of a man whose money was old enough that he no longer needed to perform his attention. "I'm setting up an independent forensic and asset intelligence firm," Ethan said. "I have a specific engagement I want to bring to you as a first client, and I want to discuss a potential capital structure if you're interested in co-founding." "What's the engagement?" Raymond said. Ethan described the Hartwell situation. Not all of it. Not the personal dimension, not the dinner, and not the seat. Just the forensic architecture. The diverted revenue, the Nevada Trust, the Shell advisory structure. Raymond was quiet for a moment. "Hartwell Group is publicly traded," he said. "It is," Ethan said. "Its institutional shareholders have standing to bring a derivative action for breach of fiduciary duty." He paused. "I know 3 of them." Raymond looked at him. "You've already made the calls." "I've had the conversations," Ethan said. "Nothing formal. Nothing that creates a paper trail until we're structured and ready." He picked up his coffee. The cup was from the bar, ceramic, thick-walled, the kind that keeps the heat in without burning your hand. I need 6 months to build the complete picture. I need a structure that lets me operate with independence. And I need a capital partner who understands that the return on this engagement is not purely financial. What is it then? Raymond said. Structural, Ethan said. You fund the build, I deliver the intelligence. We establish the firm. The Hartwell engagement becomes the proof of concept that opens every subsequent door. Raymond looked at his sparkling water for a moment. Then he looked at Ethan. You're not angry, he said. It was an observation, not a question. No, Ethan said. Most people who've been done what's been done to you are angry. Most people, Ethan said, are not very good at what I do. Raymond picked up his glass. He didn't say anything for 30 seconds. Then, send me the structural proposal by Friday. I'll have my attorney review it over the weekend. Ethan sent it Thursday evening. Raymond's attorney called back Saturday morning with 3 questions. Ethan answered all 3 in an email. By Monday, Raymond had signed the co-founder agreement for what became. After Ethan spent one evening choosing the name with the same care he brought to everything that was going to last. Axion Intelligence Partners. It was a clean name. Sharp and angular and difficult to misdirect. It said nothing about its origin and everything about its intent. Ethan set up the Delaware C Corp, established a California operating entity, appointed Petra Chen as outside counsel, and opened a business bank account with a starting balance that was, for the first time in 4 years, not tangled up in anyone else's life. He still had not moved out of the apartment. Vanessa had stopped texting about the dry cleaning, until she had started texting other things. Can we talk this week? And I know the dinner thing was not ideal. And on one Thursday at 11 p.m., I miss you. He read all of them. He responded to none of them immediately, and when he did respond, 4 days after the Thursday message, he said simply, "Work has been intense. Let's connect next week." He used the same tone he used when he was managing a client timeline, calm, forward-looking, revealing nothing. He was building in the background the way certain trees grow, all the expansion happening underground, in the root system, invisible and unassuming until the canopy suddenly appears, and the tree is, without warning, enormous. The forensic work on Hartwell took 4 months. Not 6, 4. So, because Ethan was very good, and because he had 5 years of context that no outside forensic team would have had, context that let him skip steps and move directly to the pressure points. He built the evidence architecture the way he built everything, in layers. The bottom layer was the documentary record, financial filings, LLC registrations, wire transfer records obtained through proper legal channels via a civil subpoena process Petra had quietly initiated. The middle layer was the analytical work, the pattern recognition, the modeling, the timeline reconstruction that showed how the diversion had been structured and maintained. The top layer was what Ethan called the clarity document, a 38-page report formatted in the precise and unemotional language of forensic analysis, one that described what had happened in terms specific enough to support every legal action available to every relevant party. It was, in the quiet estimation of the 3 institutional shareholders who received a summary version, the cleanest piece of forensic intelligence they had seen in 5 years. In the 5th month, Ethan moved out of the apartment. He had found a place in the Dog Patch neighborhood. Industrial conversion, high ceilings, the kind of windows that let in the particular gray-gold light of San Francisco's morning hours, and a kitchen with a new LED fixture that did not flicker. He packed what was his. It was less than he expected. 4 years, and most of what he'd accumulated was either intangible, knowledge, skill, is an almost cellular understanding of how money hides, or had been absorbed into a life that was structurally Vanessa's. He didn't fight over the furniture. He took his books, his equipment, his files, his suits, and a cast-iron pan he'd owned since before he met her. He left on a Tuesday. Vanessa was at the office. He sent her a text that said, "I've moved out. I'll handle the lease transfer. Take care." She called 4 times in the following 2 hours. He did not answer. She sent a voice message. He listened to it once. It was 7 minutes long, and it covered in sequence shock, anger, bargaining, and finally a version of understanding that still somehow managed to position his departure as an inconvenience to her schedule. And then he archived it in a folder labeled with the date. Vanessa had a very good attorney. His name was Paul Whitfield, and he practiced family and civil law out of a firm with 8 partners and a reputation for effective aggression on behalf of high-net-worth clients. He sent a letter to Ethan's address, the new one, which he had gotten from the lease transfer documents, outlining Vanessa's position on the end of the cohabitation, which was, there was nothing to divide because there had been no formal agreement, and Ethan's contributions to her professional and financial life were matters of personal generosity that created no legal claim. Ethan forwarded the letter to Petra. Petra sent back 3 words. "Perfect, let's go." The quantum meruit claim was filed in San Francisco Superior Court 6 days later. It was accompanied by a forensic exhibit package that detailed, with source-cited precision, as the specific dollar value of the unpaid consulting work Ethan had contributed to Hartwell Group over 4 years, the supply chain restructuring models, which Petra's valuation expert estimated at $1.1 million in consulting market value, the financing facilitation, including the loan co-signature, which had allowed Vanessa to access a rate structure worth approximately $340,000 in interest savings over the life of the loan. And a series of strategic introductions, including Sebastian Moreau's initial connection, which had come through Ethan's prior client network, that Petra's expert valued conservatively at $800,000 in business development terms. Total claimed amount, $2.4 million. Plus legal fees. Plus interest. On the same day, a derivative action was filed in Delaware Chancery Court on behalf of 3 institutional shareholders of Hartwell Group. The action named Vanessa Cole as a defendant and described, in the clear and devastating language of corporate law, the $6.4 million in diverted revenue, the fictitious advisory arrangement, and the Nevada trust structure that had been used to move those funds beyond the reach of the company she was fiduciarily obligated to serve. Ethan did not read the news coverage that followed. He knew it would be there. Hartwell Group was not enormous, but it was publicly traded, and it had a public-facing CEO, whose personal narrative had been carefully constructed over years in the Bay Area business press. The female founder who had scaled a logistics company, The Innovation Story, and the leadership profile in a regional business magazine that had used the word visionary 4 times in 3 pages. That story was going to collide with the filing, and the collision would be messy and loud, and he did not need to watch it in real time. He had already seen the shape of it. He knew how it ended. What he focused on instead was building Axion intelligence partners into something real. The Hartwell engagement, even before the case concluded, functioned as the proof of concept he had promised Raymond. Within 8 weeks of the filings becoming public record, Ethan received 11 inbound inquiries from institutional investors, family offices, and 1 mid-sized bank whose internal audit function had a specific and persistent problem they had been unable to resolve. He took 4 of the 11. Yencha's the criteria were simple: complexity, scale, and the degree to which the problem was one that rewarded the kind of patience and architectural thinking he was good at. By the end of the first full year of Axion's operation, the firm had 6 staff, all of them former forensic accountants, attorneys, or financial analysts who had left larger firms for specific reasons that Ethan had identified before making any offer, because he had learned from watching Vanessa that the quality of the people around you determined the quality of everything else, and that smart people left bad environments not for better salaries, but for better problems. He paid them very well anyway. The office was in a building in the financial district that Ethan had specifically selected because its building management company was owned, as through a 2-layer corporate structure, by a real estate holding entity in which Raymond Tso had a significant stake. Not Ethan's. Not yet. But the conversation had been had. The option had been structured, and Ethan understood that the building was a piece in a longer game. The same way a chess player understands that a rook placed in the center of the board is not useful only in the current position, but in 20 positions that haven't happened yet. He had learned to think this way in the apartment with the flickering light, sitting with a paper cup of black coffee, understanding for the first time that the period of being underestimated was not something to survive, but something to use. He had used it very well. The Hartwell litigation moved at the speed that complex financial litigation moves, which is to say, with the deceptive slowness of a river that looks calm at the surface and is, at the riverbed, moving fast enough to reshape stone. The derivative action in Delaware produced, 6 months in, a document production order that required Hartwell Group to provide all communications and financial records related to Ardent Pacific Holdings and the Crane Meridian Trust. Vanessa's attorneys fought the production order with 3 successive motions. They lost all 3. The documents came out. The documents were, to put it in the language Petra used in a call with Ethan on the evening they arrived, comprehensive. They documented not only the $6.4 million diversion, but an additional $1.1 million in payments that had not appeared in Ethan's initial forensic model. Funds funneled through a separate mechanism involving a series of vendor credits that had been structured to look like pricing adjustments in the company's logistics contracts. Ethan had missed those. His model caught them when the new production materials made the pattern visible. "I missed it," Ethan said. He was not angry at himself. He noted it the way a craftsman notes a measurement he needs to adjust. "You got $6.4 million of a $7.5 million fraud in the first pass without full document access," Petra said. "No one is crying for you." The Hartwell board moved quickly once the scale became clear. Vanessa was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the litigation. The board issued a statement, careful, deliberately non-committal, and hired an outside firm to conduct an independent audit. The outside firm's report, which Ethan was not involved in, but whose findings he could have predicted to within a narrow margin, confirmed the forensic picture he had already documented. 3 of Hartwell's institutional shareholders increased the size of the derivative claim. 2 others joined it. Paul Whitfield, Vanessa's attorney, sent a settlement inquiry to Petra in the 9th month of the litigation. It was for $600,000. Petra rejected it in 2 sentences. Vanessa called Ethan directly. He had not spoken to her in 8 months. He let the phone ring 4 times, and then he answered, because there were things he wanted to hear, and things he wanted her to know she could not get from him, and the only way to establish both was to pick up the phone. "Ethan?" Her voice was different, not the flat, managed tone from the dinner. Something underneath the management had shifted. "I need to talk to you." "You're talking to me," he said. "Not like this." A pause. He could hear, faintly, wind. She was outside somewhere. Not through lawyers. Then talk, he said. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, the management was gone. What was underneath it was not what he had expected. Not anger, not calculation, but something that sounded almost like disorientation. As if she had looked for the floor and found that someone had removed it. I don't understand why you're doing this. He said nothing. We were together for 4 years, she said. Everything we built. Everything you built, he said, with materials you didn't credit and a foundation you didn't pay for. His voice was still level. He was not performing coldness. He was simply being accurate. I don't have a grievance about the relationship, Vanessa. I have a forensic record and a legal claim. Those are different things. The lawsuit is going to destroy the company. The fraud destroyed the company, he said. The lawsuit is just the documentation. There was a longer silence. He waited in it. Outside his window, the San Francisco morning was coming in through the tall glass. That particular gray-gold light that he had learned to associate over the past 8 months with waking up in a space that was entirely his own. What do you want? She said. It came out small. Not tactical, genuinely small, the way a person sounds when they've run out of positions and are simply asking. What I want, Ethan said, is irrelevant to the legal process. Talk to Whitfield. He ended the call, but he set the phone down on his desk, the desk he had selected, in an office he had designed, in a firm he had built. And he looked at the view for a moment. The bay in the distance. The light. He picked up his coffee and went back to work. The quantum meruit claim was resolved in the 14th month. Settlement, not verdict, Paul Whitfield had advised Vanessa, according to what Petra relayed from the opposing side's formal communications, that the evidentiary record was such that proceeding to trial would risk a substantially larger outcome against her. The settlement amount was $1.85 million. Not the $2.4 million claimed, because settlements are not verdicts, and Petra had built into the strategy a figure with room to negotiate without losing the core. Ethan received the wire transfer on a Tuesday, reviewed the receipt, and filed it. The derivative action settled on different terms, in a separate process, in which Ethan was not directly a party, but whose outcome he had structured. Vanessa agreed to return the $7.5 million to Hartwell Group, to dissolve the Crane Meridian Trust in a manner supervised by an independent trustee, and to resign her position as CEO and board member. The Ardent Pacific LLCs were unwound. The 3 commercial properties in the East Bay that had been structured through them reverted to Hartwell Group's balance sheet. She was also, per the terms of a regulatory referral that accompanied the settlement, the subject of an SEC investigation into potential securities fraud related to the misrepresentation of Hartwell's financials during the period of the diversion. That investigation moved slowly. Federal investigations always do. But Ethan did not follow it closely. He had done what he needed to do within the structures that were available to him. What happened in the federal process was not something he could control, and not something he intended to wait on. He had other things to do. In the 16th month after the dinner at Maison Vert, Axion Intelligence Partners closed its first institutional mandate. A retainer with a family office in Houston that needed ongoing forensic intelligence support for its private equity portfolio. The retainer was substantial. It was the kind of engagement that, in the language of professional services, changes the character of a firm. It moved Axion from boutique to serious. In the 18th month, Raymond and Ethan exercised the real estate option they had been holding and acquired, through a joint venture, a minority stake in the building management company that owned the financial district property where Axion's office was located. It was not a transformative acquisition. It was a position. It was a piece on the board that had not previously been theirs. In the 20th month, a journalist from a Bay Area business publication called Ethan and asked if he was available for a profile. The journalist had written about Axion's Hartwell work, without Ethan's involvement, through public records and Petra's carefully worded statements, and wanted to discuss the firm's methodology and growth. Ethan declined the profile. He was not interested in a story. He was interested in the work. He did, however, ask the journalist a question before ending the call. "You've been covering the Hartwell story," he said. Have you spoken to Sebastian Moreau?" The journalist paused. "I haven't. Why?" "You should," Ethan said. "He has an interesting perspective on due diligence gaps in the Bay Area logistics sector." He paused. He specifically mentioned the Frankfurt deal falling apart. He said the technical preparation on the Hartwell side was not what he'd been led to expect. He gave the journalist Moreau's assistant's contact information, the young woman with the precise haircut, whose name was Lena, and who had sent him a connection request on LinkedIn 4 months after the dinner with a message that said only, "I noticed your work that night. If you're ever in Munich." Ethan had responded with a brief professional note and had, in the months since, maintained a careful and mutual correspondence with Lena that was, he recognized, and the beginning of something he did not yet have a name for, but was prepared to be patient with. He gave the journalist Lena's contact and ended the call. He thought about Moreau's face in the doorway of the private dining room at Maison Vert. The expression he had not been able to classify immediately. Not pity, but recognition. He understood it now. Moreau had been in a room with someone who had been strategically erased, and he had recognized the erasure because men of Moreau's particular experience understood that the most dangerous people in any room were rarely the ones holding the center seat. They were the ones standing in the doorway, counting. It was the 22nd month. Ethan sat in his office, the good desk, the tall windows, the morning light, and read the quarterly performance report for Axion Intelligence Partners. The revenue figure was not the number that interested him most. The number that interested him was the one representing retainer clients. 11. 11 organizations who paid Axion every month to be the people who look at things other people miss. He closed the report and looked at the bay. He had not eaten at Maison Vert since the dinner. Not because he was avoiding it. He was not a man who avoided places, but because the restaurant had, in fact, gone through a period of operational difficulty following the departure of its managing partner and had closed for renovation for 7 months. It had just reopened. Ethan had read about the reopening in a local culture publication. He thought about calling for a reservation. He thought about it for approximately 30 seconds. Then he picked up his phone and called Lena instead. She was in Munich, where it was late, and she answered on the second ring with the tone of a person who had been awake. "I have a meeting in Frankfurt in 3 weeks," he said, without preamble. "I'll be in Germany for 4 days." "You're asking me something," she said. It was not a question. "I'm telling you my schedule," he said. There was a brief silence, and then a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was adjacent to one, precise and dry and without any performance in it. "I'll clear Thursday," she said. He said goodnight and ended the call. He set the phone down. He looked at the bay for another moment, and then he opened his laptop and began reviewing the due diligence materials for a new engagement, a mid-sized real estate investment trust whose internal audit had flagged a pattern of management fee discrepancies across 14 properties in 3 states, the kind of problem that looked, on the surface, like accounting sloppiness, and which Ethan already suspected, from the one-page summary he'd been sent, was something considerably more deliberate. He pulled up the first property's LLC registration and began to trace. In the 26th month, Hartwell Group named a new CEO. She was 44, came from a supply chain background, had a reputation for being exact and unsentimental, and had, in her first statement to the press, used the phrase structural integrity 3 times. Ethan read the statement, but he thought it was well-chosen language. He did not think about Vanessa when he read it. He thought about the supply chain restructuring models in the Hartwell server, the ones with his name in the metadata. He had not reclaimed them publicly. There was no mechanism to do so, and more importantly, there was no value in it. The people who mattered in his professional life knew what he could do because they had seen him do it. He did not need a credit line and a filing from 4 years ago. He had a firm. He had 11 retainer clients. He had a real estate stake and a capital partner and an office with tall windows and a desk that was entirely his. He had, in other words, built the table. Not the one at Maison Vert, something larger and quieter and considerably harder to be removed from. And the REIT engagement concluded in the 29th month with a findings report that identified $3.1 million in systematically misclassified management fees and the structural mechanism by which those fees had been moved. A remarkably sophisticated one, Ethan acknowledged, in the report's executive summary, which he meant purely as a technical observation. The REIT's board acted on the findings within 2 weeks. 2 executives resigned. 1 did not resign, and the REIT's outside counsel was now building a case that Axion's forensic package had substantially advanced. Ethan invoiced the engagement at a rate that reflected the complexity and the outcome. He was not, at this point, cheap. He was very far from the financial forensics consultant who had done a $900,000 trace for a family office and been thanked with a wire and a handshake. Besou. That man still existed in Ethan. The patience, the precision, the willingness to sit with a problem until the problem became transparent. But the context around him had changed. He received the invoice payment on a Friday and was, on the following Monday, on a plane to Frankfurt. He had a window seat. The woman across the aisle was reading a business publication that he recognized, the same Bay Area publication whose journalist had called him 18 months earlier. He did not look to see if his name was in it. He ordered black coffee from the flight attendant and opened his laptop and reviewed the notes for his Frankfurt meeting, which was with a German infrastructure logistics firm whose parent company had recently been approached for acquisition by a European private equity group, and who needed an independent assessment of the target company's financial architecture before they committed to a letter of intent. It was clean, important work, the kind that required the particular combination of patience and precision and cold clarity that Ethan had always possessed and had now, for the first time, built a life around. A structure that was his, that fit exactly the shape of what he was. The plane climbed, the city receded. He did not look out the window at it. He was reading. On Thursday evening, he met Lena at a restaurant in the Sachsenhausen quarter of Frankfurt. Not the kind of restaurant designed to impress, the kind designed to be excellent, a distinction that Ethan had come to understand was the most reliable indicator of quality in almost any domain. She was already seated when he arrived. Precise haircut, same as he remembered. The tablet was not in evidence. She had a glass of Riesling. She looked at him for a moment with an expression that was direct and undecorated. "You look different than you did at the Maison Verte dinner," she said. "Different how?" "Less contained," she said. "The same, but less—" She considered the word. "Compressed." He sat down. He ordered water, and then, after looking at the wine list for exactly as long as it deserved, a glass of the same Riesling. He looked at her. "Tell me about the Frankfurt deal," he said. "The one that didn't happen." Her expression shifted slightly. Not discomfort, something more interesting. Recognition, again. That word. "You want to know what I saw?" "I want to know what you saw." "I saw a man who had prepared everything," she said. "Boom, and a room full of people who didn't know it." She held the glass by the stem, the way people hold wine glasses when they're thinking rather than drinking. "I noted it in my report. The gaps in the Hartwell presentation were significant, but the information existed in that room. It was sitting at the wrong table." Ethan said nothing. "Moreau noticed too," she said. "He didn't say anything at the dinner, but afterward, in the car, he said—" She paused. "He said, there was a man in the doorway who knew every answer they couldn't give. That's the man I'd have wanted at the table." Ethan picked up his wine. "Moreau has good instincts," he said. "He does," she agreed. "He also asked me, earlier this year, to identify the right partner for a new logistics intelligence initiative he's building. Pan-European. Infrastructure focus." She looked at Ethan. "I sent him one name." The Riesling was cold and very clean. The restaurant was quiet in the particular way of places that take their silence seriously. "Tell him to have his office call Petra Chen," Ethan said. "She handles our engagement structure." Lena nodded. She picked up the menu. "Now stop talking about work," she said, "or I'll reconsider Thursday entirely." He stopped talking about work. He looked at the menu, which was in German and which he could read adequately, and he thought for a brief moment, not a long one, not a meditative one, just the quick passage of a thought, about a round table by a bar, a flickering bulb, a paper coffee cup damp on one side. He set the thought down. He ordered. In the 32nd month, Axion Intelligence Partners moved to new offices, on 3 floors of a building in the financial district. Not the same building, a different one, but in the same neighborhood, 2 blocks from the first. The new building had been recommended by Raymond's real estate team and was, in several structural respects, superior. Better natural light, a more robust infrastructure for the secure data systems Axion's work required, and a landlord relationship that included a 5-year option to convert the leased floors to an ownership position through a mechanism that Ethan had structured with Petra and Raymond's attorneys over the course of 6 months. It was not a simple structure. It was, however, an elegant one. The kind of thing that, when you understood it fully, made the person who had built it seem, in retrospect, to have been thinking far ahead of where everyone else was looking. On the day of the move, Ethan was the first person in the new space. He arrived at 6:40 in the morning, before the moving team, before the staff, before even the building manager who had offered to meet him. He stood in the main floor. Empty, light coming in through the east-facing windows in that specific morning quality that he had come to think of as the city's best hour. And he looked at the space. He thought about what he wanted in it. Not the furniture. That had been decided. The character, the quality of work that would happen here. He walked to the window and looked at the street below. And he thought about the first morning in the dog patch apartment, sitting under new light, with a fresh document open, and a name for a company that didn't yet exist. While he thought about Gerard Falk on his Marin porch with his instant coffee and his seagulls, telling the truth about a company that had hurt him because Ethan had asked the right questions. He thought about Petra capping her marker and saying, "You're holding quite a bit." He thought about his seat, the one at the head of the table that he had specified, positioned in the light where he was supposed to sit. Where Marcus Hale had sat instead, drinking the wine that Ethan had ordered for 45 minutes of breathing room, talking about Frankfurt infrastructure without knowing what it meant. He stood at the window a little longer. Then he took out his phone and called Petra. She answered on the second ring. "You're in the new space," she said. It was not a question. "I am," he said. "I want to talk about the Moreau structure. Tut, as the pan-European scope means we need a European entity. I've been thinking about whether to establish it through the existing Delaware parent or structure a new vehicle." "Good morning to you too," she said dryly. "Good morning," he said. "Walk me through the tax implications of a new vehicle versus a European branch of the parent." She walked him through it. He stood at the window while she talked, looking at the street filling up with the morning. Delivery trucks and early commuters, and a woman walking a dog who stopped to look at something on the ground, examined it, and then walked on. When Petra finished, he said, "New vehicle. Netherlands holding company for the European operations, subsidiary in Frankfurt for the Moreau work." "I'll draft the structure this week," she said. "Thank you," he said. He ended the call. But he put the phone in his pocket. He stood at the window for another moment. Outside, the city was just waking up, and somewhere in it, in a smaller office, or a rented apartment, or perhaps in some other transitional space, Vanessa was managing whatever came next for her, and he found that he had no particular feeling about this. Not satisfaction, not residue, not the specific warmth that people who have been wronged sometimes describe when they imagine the wrongdoer's suffering. Just the clean absence of something that had occupied space for a long time and no longer did so. The moving team arrived at 7. He directed them with the same precision he brought to everything. He knew where the desks went, which wall the secure server room needed to face, where the best afternoon light was, and how to place the common area furniture to take advantage of it. He had thought about all of it. He had drawn a floor plan on a legal pad 3 weeks earlier, in pencil, and measured the space himself on a Sunday morning so that the plan was accurate. By noon, the office was arranged. By 2, the technology team had the systems running. By 4, his staff had begun arriving for their first day in the new space, and the quality of the energy in the room, the focus, the motion, the particular sense of people who are good at what they do being in the right place to do it, was exactly what he had wanted. He sat at his desk. He pulled up the preliminary materials for a new engagement. A Singapore-based family office that had reached Axion through Lena's referral network, concerning a set of anomalies in a Southeast Asian port logistics company that needed the specific kind of patient attention Axion had built its reputation on. He read the first page. His assistant knocked and entered. "The building manager is here for the formal key handover," she said. "Send her in," he said, without looking up. She also mentioned, I don't know if this is relevant, that the previous tenant of these floors was Hartwell Group's West Coast Regional Office. They vacated in the 22nd month. She thought you might want to know. Ethan looked up from the page. He looked at his assistant, a young woman named Dara, who had come from a large forensic accounting firm, and who had, in 6 months, demonstrated the particular combination of precision and curiosity that he valued most. He looked at her for a moment, and then he looked at the office around him, the tall windows, the morning light, the organized and humming space that was entirely, structurally, and legally his. "No," he said. "That's not relevant." He looked back at the page. "Send her in." Dara turned to go. "Dara," he said. She turned back. "Order coffee for the building manager. The good kind." He turned to Paige. "And fix the light in the back conference room. The bulb."
I went to see this Australian band, INXS, when I was a teen, and their support totally changed my view on music. Yeah, like it's crazy how like the openers, logically it makes sense that the opener is usually gonna put on a better show because they have more to prove. You know, they're not the headliner. They're not the ones that the majority of the people are there to see. So they gotta really bring their A game when they're on stage. And so like that, it logically makes sense, but yeah. I need to check that to see if Dry Jacket came out with their new album. I want to hear it. Can't remember if it was the end of January. No, they dropped a new song. This is Dry Jacket. Yeah, Dry Jacket's not really that popular, like on... Oh, my mouse died. That's a bummer. They have 15,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. But yeah.